I wrote Structural Combat. Let's read some of it. Back to Saul's words. One of the few branches of international law that has expressly embraced the concept of terrorism is IHL, International Humanitarian Law. Various IHL treaties prohibit terrorism in reaction to the intimidation of civilians by the fascist powers of the Second World War. In 2003, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia recognized in the Gaelic case that violations of these treaty provisions may constitute a war crime of intending to spread terror among the civilian population. Terror was defined simply as extreme fear. On the facts in Gaelic, the war crime of terror was found to have been committed by a campaign of sniping and shelling civilians in the besieged city of Sarajevo. As a result of the nature of the civilian activities targeted, the manner in which the attacks on civilians were carried out, and the timing and duration of the attacks on civilians, the Special Court for Sierra Leone has also entered convictions for the war crime of terrorism committed by acts such as amputations and mutilations of civilians. In the absence of a universal agreement, greater progress has been made in the regional level. While some regional conventions take a sectoral approach, like international treaties, the regional conventions have given rise to human rights concerns because many of their definitions of terrorism are drafted loosely and fail to satisfy the principle of legality. Some of them reclassify as terrorism ordinary crimes or public order offenses or even insurrection. Some criminalize conduct infringing vague values such as stability, territorial integrity, political unity or sovereignty, of states imperiling the honor or freedoms of individuals. Some safeguard ambitious objects such as harm to a national resource or environmental or cultural heritage. One intermingles terrorism with separatism or extremism. The UE includes an ill-defined motive element of seriously destabilizing or destroying the fundamental political, constitutional, economic, or social structures of a country or an international organization. The elimination of the political offense exemption in the context of such a wide definitions of terrorism is especially problematic since it substantially curtails the freedom of populations to resort to domestic political resistance to violent oppressive governments. 3 conventions, the IOC, Arab, and African, carve out acts by liberation movements in pursuit of self-determination, problematically implying that any means may be justified for a just cause. Those were Ben Saul's words, and here are my notes. This section is evidence of just how much the idea of terrorism being a crime against civilians has been triumphing in the international community, such as calling out the killing of civilians by state actors, as well as regions creating their own laws to protect civilians from states. Despite Saul's understandable critique of how many other ideals were sprinkled into the respective definitions, it does show an international desire to have laws on the books to prevent the crime of terrorism. It should also be mentioned that when addressing resistance fighting, that the liberation movements adhere to the IHL and not target civilians. Certainly, not all means of securing liberty are equally justifiable. The civilian population of oppressive states are not to blame for the oppression. Rather, the blame rests on the structural combatants within the regime. However, no liberation movement should be fully condemned for asserting self-determination, as even terroristic acts that arise from them would not commence had the occupation ended at the request of the liberation movement. Still, even struggles for self-determination, one can't fight terror with terror, because because terror against civilians does not disempower the structural apparatus designed to oppress. Surely, targeted counter-violence against those responsible for terrorism is a much more effective strategy and should be seen by international law as humane and ethical assassination. To put it plainly, the killing of structural combatants for the purpose of liberation should never be considered terrorism, even if the structural combatant has never lifted a gun in their life. Their decisions cause thousands of deaths.